I'm no Indiana Jones, but I can play one sometimes here on YouTube. That's why the extra whiskers. Believe me, there's plenty of ancient artifacts that we could dig up from the past that confuse the younger generations. Some of them are barely 50 years old, but they confound Gen Z and definitely Gen Alpha. Things they've never seen before or confound them on how they were used to begin with. These were institutions, things we saw and used every single day, and it never really occurred to us that at some point, they'd be gone. Although, that's the very nature of everything, even us. I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen Experience, 10 of the most common, taken for granted items during our era we never imagined would become the time capsule they have. But here we are. If you're ready to explore this archaeological dig, let's go. You think the modern world has a market on convenience? No way. Through the 1980s, cigarettes were easier to get than ever before. No need to show a license or even drive to the store. These beauties were almost in every entrance and lobby anywhere. And no one was checking your age to use it either. Drop your coins, about 85 cents should do it, and pull the plunger to release your smokes in the vending catch tray. Ooh, matches too. Bonus. Cigarette machines sat next to soda machines, and with their peekaboo openings showcased a dozen choices of cancer sticks for your smoking pleasure. Everyone was there. Pall Mall, Salem, Winston, Marlboro. Never be caught with an empty pack again. Just send your kid to get them for you. They loved being outside and riding their bike, so have them go pick them up while they're out. One was never far away, and anyone could use these unmonitored vending boxes. These stylish cigarette machines were nothing like their early 20th century counterparts, but after some unique branded designs, they settled into this classy display, complete with plunger release that was fun to play with when you were waiting for your parents at the counter or accompanying mom on league night at the bowling alley. Speaking of the bowling alley, a Gen Z's initial response to this item might be it's an avant-garde travel bag or purse. And they wouldn't be wrong, but that's not how they began life. These unique shaped and bold designed bags might be a little difficult for your youngin' to recognize other than just a piece of luggage. But I know you're all familiar with this ancient artifact. It was designed with a very distinct purpose in mind, one that young people today are growing further and further away from. This was anyone who was anyone's bowling bag. Yes, engineered to hold your favorite ball, and surprisingly, still have room for wrist guards, talcum, rag, and maybe, just maybe even a cool pair of two-tone bowling shoes and a shoehorn. Straight out of the mid-century and beyond, these streamlined designs harken back to the famous Pan Am flight attendants, but were ubiquitous with families from the 60s through the 80s and still available today, although seen less and less in pop culture. The bags have changed little. However, it is we who have changed, as we don't tote our kids to the alley where it's a league night for mom or dad like we used to. Sad, really. Just lay these down in front of a kid today and revel in their perplexity. The confusion on their faces will only get more obvious when you ask them, what is it? Or better yet, you put down a camera and ask them to load it. I can only imagine a young person just picking up the camera and looking how to turn on the screen, not where the film goes. A roll of 35mm or even 110 film look completely different from one another, so they may not even see how they're related. But it's all film. Film with 12, 24, and eventually 36 exposures to snap family photos during vacation or other milestones in life. The 110 was meant to be foolproof, even creating a one-shot frame that went around the film cartridge itself that any idiot could use. Of course, you still needed flash cubes sometimes. Now imagine laying those next to these film rolls as well as these canisters in front of your Gen Z and see if they can figure them out together. It's like a puzzle. It is possible, although slim, they have come across one of these black or opaque film containers in their lives. Empty wastes of plastic today, they were once easily reused as pill containers. But now, why not art? Just like used corks. By now, I feel like many young people have seen this. In old movies maybe, or from videos, but it's slim to none that any of the younger generations have ever actually handled a rotary phone, let alone used one. Sure, it seems like an easy concept to understand for us, but that's all we knew. Still, watching young people try and figure it out can be a real hoot. They have very little experience or context about using a rotary phone, but we all use the same one or two that we had in our house for years. Changes in technology like this didn't come along as often as they do today. Long before every individual had their own, we shared the house phone and used it when necessary. To actually talk to someone in real time. That alone will scare your kids. Before push button, there was a rotary, and waiting for the later numbers to go all the way back around to their starting place before dialing the next number was maddening, even for us. Looking back, rotary was the phone of the devil.
That was better than I could have ever hoped for.
One quick look might give off Cuban cigar box, but which of your kids or any young person would even be able to pull that answer out of their butt? These empty reinforced cardboard boxes were filled with possibilities as we started each school year. If the possibilities were number 2 pencils, erasable Bic pens, a troll pencil topper, branded erasers, or even colored markers. Like lunchboxes at the time, a pencil box came with hundreds of different designs. In the 70s, they were full of that groovy art and yellow submarine aesthetic. Pencil boxes have evolved since the 70s, and by the 80s, hard plastic utility boxes were taking over. A simple sticker of any number of popular intellectual properties was adhered to the top. Get yourself a Muppet Babies or a Star Wars pencil box, whatever floats your boat. For the more serious, there was the soft plastic with the zipper style as well, but what's fun about that? This one was mine. This design, exactly. Probably because it was cost effective. Then there was the more advanced, the more exciting pencil cases with multiple trays and bells and whistles that you can find even versions of it still today. A pencil box topped the list of supplies needed to bring into the first week of school, and kids were often proud of their choice, happy to pop it out from within their desk after lifting the tabletop piece and rummaging through it for just the right writing instrument for the job. When crafts were still a thing in school, these little boxes eventually saw a lot of graffiti and were home to the scissors and paste. To glue things, not to eat. Mork from Ork isn't the only thing that came in an egg during the Gen experience, but that's just another relic that would confuse young people today. This artifact is one from the past, and to this day I can't make heads or tails of why something so delicate came in an egg. Maybe it was just for that reason. These egg-shaped containers were in every department or drugstore, even coming on these rather phallic or suppository-shaped display stands. The eggs themselves were blazoned with the word legs, or was it eggs? The fancy font with the egg shape made you think French, and that meant expensive, classy. But they were simply pantyhose, nylons merchandised in an egg-shaped container, I suppose to protect them, but probably just more for the gimmick. The ads were sexy, promising sheer energy, whatever that meant, but the name said it all. There was nothing too upper crust about these in the long run. They were just legs. We sat so close to the TV because we had to change the channel by hand, and we didn't want to keep getting up to do so. As long as the dial was in arm's reach, we were good. These old model TVs with their manual dials to switch between channels were a pain in the butt. Remote controls were still new, and it felt like a luxury if your household had one growing up in the 70s and maybe even into the turn of the 80s. Flipping the channels meant there was at least 3 main networks available, and perhaps UHF that you could then tune for another station. But even when cable arrived, the dial was still used initially along with an added box that might incorporate channel changing via a zip tuner that you moved from side to side to find the right station from all those early and limited number of new channels being broadcast. TV screens are so streamlined and clean these days, turning a dial seems positively primeval. Clear surfaces, TVs may or may not have a button somewhere on the side or the bottom, but most likely rely on the digital remote to turn it on, switch channels, or even use the menu to go between streaming networks. A dialed TV will still look like a television to your youngster, but one that's just a little off. How to use it may certainly have them befuddled. What was once the norm has certainly had the best glow-up of them all. Do you think most kids would recognize this? Do they know tape cassettes and tape players enough through other media to spot this one out in a crowd? It is an ancient relic, even if the spongy foam earphones tethered from the actual source have evolved into the current earbud. The original Sony Walkman debuted in 1979. How many of you had it? It was a miracle and far better than toting around a boombox. Here we were with our music more mobile than ever, and those advancements would continue rapidly into the next millennia. Has it changed fast enough, far enough to count the Walkman as an ancient relic that your kids or the youngest generations can't recognize or identify? If so, then they may very well not understand how to operate this, let alone have a tape or even know how to insert one into the player. And as for turning the tape over, forget it. They don't have the patience or the time for that nonsense. Very similar to the TV, but this time we were already seated right next to it, the crank. To get some air, we had to crank the lever round and round to open the window. Who still uses the spinning action to ask someone to roll down their window? Guilty. Hell, we say roll down your window still to this day. Put a kid next to one of these now, and they'll take a minute to look before they figure something must be missing. The electronic window lever. It might be fun to watch a young person try to figure out the crank and make it work. Then again, that might be too much work for the push-button generation. The manual crank window for your car was an absolute convenience, and I wonder today if a crank wouldn't be better still. Somehow the automatic windows and locks never fail to be the first thing to go on a modern car. They stick, stop halfway, malfunction altogether, and then you have to do something about it. But let's be real, you probably just leave it, especially if it's a back window. It was such an inconvenience to take doors off and fix those kind of things, even back then. Sometimes it just wasn't worth it. What do you think about the crank versus automatic? Kids may have heard of this before and might even deduce that somehow water is involved. But to actually have seen one in the wild, now that's rare. The first time your kids or any young person sees a waterbed, they might give pause. Cautious even.
Daddy, can I have a waterbed? Please, Daddy, can I have a waterbed?
Not us. We rolled right into it and would go with the flow. Of the waves, that is. Still looking confused, a young person might simply ask, why? And the answer is, why not? Because we could. Waterbeds are so foreign today. Although I was such a fan, I had one in the early 80s. You felt elevated, so cool to have one. But in reality, a waterbed was nothing but trouble. Some people really enjoyed the motion of the ocean when they slept, but that constant movement just kept me awake. And it was always a challenge pulling myself up and out in the morning. Plus, waterbeds have been known to kill. Don't scare your cat while they're reclining on one of these. You'll be sorry. Flooding? You better hope to God you're on the first level. Basement even. These behemoths were not light or easy to assemble or maneuver on your own. Waterbeds could be huge and heavy, but they were a statement. And that statement is, don't bother. But did we listen? No. Waterbeds are so far out of favor these days, most young people could probably barely identify one. Not like we could. But perhaps the retirement of the old waterbed is more of a mercy killing. As far as historical digs go, this one was a success. We hit the mother lode with all kinds of ancient relics that we'd have to explain to young people, or at the very least, demonstrate how they were used. Many of these artifacts have gone way of the dodo, but videos like this are a little time capsule we can revisit anytime we want. So although younger generations might be confused by some of these relics of a different time, they made up our lives, and we wouldn't trade them for anything. Just like I wouldn't trade your subscription and like that you might give this video. And if you think of other great artifacts from the Gen experience that would need some explaining to some young people, please add them in the comments as well. Thank you all for watching the show and sticking to the end. Until next time.